Hello, everyone, and welcome to session 2 of Basics of Graphic Design. As a reminder, if you want to go back and reference the presentation and course outline, you can find links to both of those on the homepage of this course. So in the first session, we talked about things like balance, scale and hierarchy, and variety and emphasis. And so I wanted to take this session to break down some of those things I discussed and put it into more of a practical lesson so you can see how to put these skills to use. So let's get started. I am working in a website. It's called canva.com. I'm sure most of you have heard of it. If not, it is a template-based website where you can find designs for creating things for your church or business, advertisements, PowerPoints, logos, all kinds of things. And I found it to be useful for when I get really busy as a designer and I want to put out something really quickly. So, like I said, we talked about things like balance, scale and hierarchy, and variety and emphasis. So I'm going to give you more of a practical way to look at these things that I was not able to show in the first session. So as far as balance, it's the equal distribution of visual weight, so how any one thing will attract the eye. So I've got my workspace here, and as I spoke on earlier, I divided my section into my workspace into 9 equal sections, and that's called the rule of thirds, and that just helps keep your workspace balanced, and everything on there that will go on there will need to kind of stay balanced by using these 4 middle points. So you can all see that I have just a plain white square right in the middle of the workspace, and something that brings balance obviously is putting directly in the middle. But let's say you have 2 objects, and what I'm doing is I'm just clicking Option or Alt and clicking and dragging to duplicate that. So now we have 2 squares, and so to balance those, obviously you'd want to put them side by side. You could also do top to bottom to bring some balance to it, things like that. And as far as scale and hierarchy, you think of things like color, size, number, negative space. So as for color, let's say we were to change the color of one of these squares to like a bright yellow. Instantly, when you look at this, your eye's probably going to be drawn to the yellow square just automatically. And so that will also bring balance. Let's say you want to add more than just the 2 squares. You could change the size and make 3 smaller squares here in the bottom. Bring that one down a little bit. And that will also bring balance to your workspace if you wanted to do it that way. And so that's how you show balance as well as scale and hierarchy, because scale and hierarchy, like I said earlier, helps the viewer navigate your work. In other words, where to begin and where to go next. And so our eyes are naturally going to go down this way on a workspace. And so it helps to keep the important stuff at the top, and then as they work their way down, more information that's not quite as important as the main point. And also, negative space is basically all the rest of the space that is around here. And so you don't want too much negative space in your work, because then it might seem a little bit too empty, if that makes sense. So now we're going to move on to types of fonts, and these are a good visual representation of serif fonts, sans serif fonts, and display fonts. And as I had said, I try to use no more than 3 fonts in any type of design that I do. I usually try to stick to 2, definitely not just 1 if I can help it, but 3. If you're going to use 3, a display font is a good option to maybe have a title or a header or something like that. And something else I talked about is kerning and tracking or leading. And Canva has an option like that. It's just called letter spacing and line spacing, but it's the same concept. And so you can increase the space in between letters or decrease it that way. And you can also increase and decrease the line or the space in between those two lines of text. And so that makes it easy to adjust real simple text, to adjust the spacing. You don't want it too tight or too far away. And same goes for here, because otherwise it might get hard to read. So a nice middle ground is where you want to be at for all your designs. So something like that. All right. And so one last thing I want to cover is helping you to put into practice some of the things that we've learned so far. And so with anything, especially an event, you're going to want to have 4 main things, which is the title of the event, the location, the date, and the time. And you might also want to have a logo or a picture thrown there if you would like to add that. And so these are all same size, same font. And so let's say you want to put some variety in with this. So you can come up here and change the font to something like this. It's more of a display type font. And you could increase the size like that to make that the thing that stands out the most. For the location, you might want to bold it and all caps it to show people where the location is going to be, but it's still bold enough to where people will see that's where this is going to be held at. Same with the date, but maybe you don't want to bold it. You still want it to be noticed. You might add a little italics. And then the time, you don't really have to do much with it. I might add just the actual 7 o'clock portion, and so that kind of brings emphasis to that as well. All right, and you could definitely balance it out just like this on your workspace. You could take this object here, bring this to the top, and then center everything underneath it. That's another way to bring balance. Something like that would look nice. But like I said, with this workspace, you don't want too much being on the outsides of the space for too much negative space. So you might increase this to really bring emphasis to the name, the location, date of the event. So that's just a simple way to put into practice all the things that I've talked about so far. And you can certainly play around with things like this, different fonts that you want to try out. You can change the color of things if you wanted this to be maybe like a red color. And so really it's up to you on what you want to experiment with and what you want to include in your designs. Just make sure it's not too busy, and just use all the basic tips that I had talked about as far as emphasis, as far as color, size, number, and things like that. So that's basically it for this session. I hope you'll stay tuned for session 3, where we're going to go over some basic design tips for things like logos, flyers, and more.